Hey, Rising Seniors. My name is Meg Waldron Sheriff, and I'm here today to talk to you about how to dive in and get thinking about your college essays. So, after looking at some mentor texts and some exemplars, I like to look with my students to the Common App site and just see what the questions are, and just have like a quick Q&A to see what kind of ideas you can generate. So, I'm going to kind of model what this might look like for you at home. So often this year, I saw analysis paralysis. So students just tried to think of the best stories, the best anecdotes, and they just couldn't get anything down. So the best way to do this is not to overthink it, but just to kind of jump with what comes to you. And you might realize that you have a lot of personal stories you can tell, and they might be applicable to multiple questions. So let's get started. The first one reads, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful, they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. So oftentimes I have students that will write here about like religious activities or affiliations. Maybe they were involved in Young Life. Maybe they serve at their temple. Anything like this is a great idea. I also have students who come from diverse backgrounds. So maybe they were raised in England, lived for a little bit in Australia, and then moved to the US. So this question is really multifaceted. There's lots of different ways you can answer it. But those are just a couple of ways you might take a stab at a question like that. The next one reads, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? So this one gets a little bit tricky for students because it can lend itself to a negative response. And while writing can be very therapeutic, the college essay isn't necessarily the place for that. However, it is extremely important to show how you might have grit and tenacity and that you were able to bounce back from a tough situation. So, with this question, I've often seen where students might talk about, um, for example, like a failed project. That they worked on with a group where they collaborated and the collaboration just did not go well, or maybe a major assessment that they overshot and thought, I've got this, I don't need to study, I'm good. And then the learning curve was just so much more than they anticipated. I've also had students talk about like attempts at products. So maybe they're in a specialty center where they work on different apps or different passion projects or projects of some sort, and it just didn't work. It fell short of something they were expecting. And then when they went back to the drawing board and reconfigured this project, it ended up being so much better than anything they ever anticipated. This next question proves to be the most challenging for most of the seniors that I work with. Reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? Having been a former IB teacher, we encouraged debate and discourse in class. However, I have found in recent years in classrooms that students are less likely to engage in kind of that healthy debate. And I think some of that prompts from just a lot of anxiety that we've seen in and around the pandemic and post-pandemic, where students weren't really in the classroom in discussions. Also, with the political climate we're in now, sometimes teachers are avoiding discussions that could potentially be controversial. So this question has proven to be much more challenging for students, I've noticed in the last couple of years. So with a question like this, it might be a book that you read. It might be a policy that took place at your school where you're like, oh, gosh, it just doesn't really sit right with me. So anything like that might be a great experience, a great opportunity to write about. So these are just a few ways to kind of jumpstart these prompts. Again, you don't have to dive in and write a full essay. Look at each question, see where your same stories, your same anecdotes might be applicable to various prompts. And sometimes the best way to get started is simply to get started. Stay tuned for more tips on conquering your college essay.